Hello, humans of the internet. Happy Friday. You have made it through the end of the week. I hope it has gone well. We are going to move into our second part of talking about civilizations before we go into Mesopotamia next week. And yesterday we talked about just like what it is, what it means to be civilized. Is everyone civilized? Are there people who aren't civilized? So today we're going to look at kind of a checklist of things that most civilizations should have. They don't necessarily have to have all of these, but they should have most of these checked off. So this assignment will be a little different. Is an Edpuzzle assignment. So here periodically it will stop and ask you questions that you will need to answer, and you can go back and watch everything up to that point to help you figure out the answers if you need it. So if when the video pauses, there's gonna be questions. Just go ahead and play through it like normal. So our first item that we are gonna look at, and I will put the link to this article in Canvas as well. It's kind of long, so I'm gonna skip parts of it. But if you want to read the full article, I will put that in Canvas for you all as well. So civilizations, we talked about how it's just a kind of complex way of saying people at their highest social and cultural development. Now, to get that point, we have to look at what exactly makes up a civilization's kind of cultural and social high point. So this article breaks it down into 6 things that you should look for. The first one is large urban centers, cities, essentially. Monumental architecture and unique art style. So basically, fancy buildings and art. Okay. The third one is a shared communication strategy. That can be something as simple as language, writing, just ways of communicating that everyone in that group understands. 4, systems for administering territories. Fancy way of saying a government. Number 5, a complex division of labor. That one's probably a new one that I'll talk about probably a little bit more here shortly when we get to that one. But that one's probably, I would say, it's one of the most important ones. And then the last one is a division of people into social and economic classes. That one, also important, but we'll get to that in a second. But the first one is just those large urban cities. These allow people who basically settle in one place, and basically they abandon that nomadic lifestyle, just moving around from place to place. They've settled in this spot. This is their spot. They're going to make it their city, and they'll go from there. The example they give here is Teotihuacan. I believe that is the Aztecs, one of the Aztec cities in modern day Mexico. It had as many as 200,000 people. It was made possible because they were able to farm the land around the city, and so they were able to grow this food. They were able to maintain this permanent city. That it also played into what they did for their economy. They were able to take deposits of obsidian, which is a volcanic rock that was used as a cutting tool, a knife basically, and traders traded or exported obsidian to other surrounding groups for other things that they couldn't get themselves. So having a urban center, a city, allowed for groups to then trade with other groups for things that they couldn't get themselves. If you want to read this a little bit more, like I said, I'll put the link to the article in Canvas as well. Next one is monuments and art. So basically this is talking about civilizations usually want to kind of make sure they're talked about after they're gone. Best way to do that, build some fancy buildings and create some art. So a good example is the ziggurat buildings from Mesopotamia, which we'll talk about next week. So if you're confused about what that is, don't worry about it. We'll get there. Another good example is the pyramids. We all know that the pyramids were built by the Egyptians. They are like the symbol of ancient Egypt. Most people when they talk about Egypt, they talk about the pyramids. Basically, the monuments, architecture is just a way for the civilization to kind of preserve its legacy going forward. The example they give here is Great Zimbabwe. That is something we will get to probably next semester in the spring when we go into Africa, but it was the old ancient capital of the Shona Kingdom in southern Eastern Africa. It's still standing parts of it are still standing today. It is a very cool place to look at if you get the chance. Go to Google Earth or just Google it. You'll see what I'm talking about. But we'll talk about it more once we get into Africa in the spring. But that's the example they give. Usually these buildings or art represent native animals, native writing of the civilization, that kind of thing. The third one is shared communication. So basically a language that everyone understands, a writing system that everyone understands, numbers, symbols, that kind of thing. So basically anything that allows that group to communicate with each other in a way that even if they are spread out over hundreds of miles, they can still understand what is being said. So the example they give is the Inca from South America. They actually, as far as we know, didn't have a writing system like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, and so on. They actually used quipu, which is a device made of strings knotted in particular patterns and colors. So they knew that, okay, this pattern and then these colors meant this. This knot in this color meant this. Basically, they didn't have a written language like we would expect, but they had other ways of communicating through a shared system of communication. Another example they talked about is in Mesopotamia, which we'll get to again next week. They had a writing system called cuneiform, just a collection of triangle wedge shapes that was understood to mean this or what. Yeah. We'll talk about what it looks like, what it means, all that fun stuff next week. But in the Incan Empire in South America, they used a string system. In Mesopotamia, they had a writing system. Egypt had their hieroglyphics. That kind of thing. The next one is known as infrastructure and administration. So basically, do you have the ability to govern your city, your cities, your empire? The example they give is ancient Rome. And that is actually where the word civilization itself comes from. It comes from the Latin word civis, meaning citizen. So if you remember from last year, I believe Mr. Lewis talked about the Roman Empire. It was stretched from England, Great Britain, all the way to like modern day Israel. And yeah, how do you govern something that big? You have to have some kind of bureaucracy, some kind of government system that allows you to manage that. You have to have the infrastructure to do that. You have to have the roads, the transports, all that stuff goes into this. It's kind of hard to do that if you don't have the infrastructure to do that. If you don't have the capabilities of moving information quickly from place to place. Rome is known for their roads, their aqueducts, all that fun stuff. They had a legal system. They had all the things you need to govern a city, or not necessarily a city, but an empire from one end to the other. So The next one we are going to look at is, I would argue, one of the most important, and that is known as divisions of labor. So essentially what division of labor means is that you are able to find it. Basically, people can do different things. Not everyone has to be a farmer. Not everyone has to be a sword maker. Not everyone has to be a part of the government. Not everyone is a priest. Division of labor means people can specialize in certain things. You might be the farmer. I might be the blacksmith making the weapons for the army. And I don't know, Mrs. Frost might be the leader of might be the priest, and Mr. Lewis might be the king. So each of us does a specific thing. We have divided our labor in a way to benefit everyone. And this is possible because we are able to grow enough food through irrigation, through all the farming techniques we developed to allow us to kind of specialize in certain things. That is known as the division of labor. And that is, like, I would argue, one of the key components in allowing civilizations to go from just a small group of people to a massive city, and in some cases a massive empire. They're able to divide their efforts, their work, into groups that support the greater good. Again, you have the farmers growing the food for the people, and since they're growing enough food for everybody else, people who would normally be farming are then able to go into sword making, into writing, into government, into the priests. So division of labor is just allowing others to specialize in certain things that prior to this development of farming, development of cities, they couldn't really do. If you were too worried about getting food for yourself, are you really going to care about how you're going to make a sword? No, your first priority is going to be food, but now that priority is taken care of, we can go on to, okay, I want to make this, or I want to write this. So the last one we're going to look at is known as class structure. This is one that we'll see, and just about every civilization we'll look at this semester, in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, especially in India. Basically what this is it's dividing people into two separate class systems based on your income, how much money you make, and what you do for a living. Oh, that moves. So essentially, an example I'll use is India. India has what is known as the caste system, which basically says, all right, if you're at the bottom level of this, you are they're called the untouchables, meaning most people won't associate with them. They do the jobs that no one else wants to do. They do the manual labor that no one wants to do. You don't associate with those people. They don't associate with you. Kind of the outcasts of the world, if you will. So India's is largely an economic, social, and where at the top you have priests, government leaders. Those people are the top tier of society. They have all the money, they know all the people, they have all the luxuries that you and I would want, but they're at the top of society because of in India, their family, who they were born into. Then you have the traders and the merchants and the farmers and everybody else in classes below, but it's largely based on what you do for a living and how much money you have. Another good example is here in the West, United States, Europe, South America, we typically divide ourselves into economic classes. We have the wealthy people, the middle class people, and then we have everyone else. So we will see across the school year how this social class system, this economic social class structure, has led to the development of civilization, and then also led to the downfall of certain civilizations who just could not get over this rigid social structure that then led to all kinds of problems for them that eventually led to their downfall. Again, if you want to read this a little bit more, I will link this in Canvas, but there are 3 other things I want to talk about real quick. I know this is kind of a longer video, but there are 3 things that also help develop a civilization outside of the 6 we just talked about. Trade, conflict, and exploration. So trading with other civilizations helps you expand your reach, helps you expand your influence, your ideas. If people aren't willing to trade with you, you can always go fight them. That's usually an option for most civilizations in history. Okay, y'all don't want to work with us, we're just gonna kill you. And then the last one is exploring and innovating. If you are not actively exploring the world around you, looking for better ways to do things, eventually your civilization becomes outdated and is vulnerable to takeover. We'll see this in China eventually, where the Chinese kind of cut themselves off, sealed themselves into China, and it ultimately led to the collapse of some of the ancient Chinese dynasties. They weren't willing to work with others weren't willing to work with them, conflict, boom, by ancient China. Very simplified version there, but the idea is the same. So that is all I have. Hopefully you have been able to answer the questions. If you need me to help you answer those, shoot me an email. I will be more than happy to help. I hope you all have a good weekend, and I will see you all on Monday.